Jason, do you know how long I've wanted to have you on this show?
At least a couple of weeks, I'm sure, because that's when we first started talking about it.
I think I first met you probably 2017 at some
Yeah.
conference. And I learned a little bit about you. And then the more I learned, I go, oh, he did that too. And he did that too. And then he did that too. And so there's radio, and then there's satellite radio, and you worked for a team as well. So I I don't even know where to start. So I've decided to start right at community college. Tell me about Hillsborough.
Hillsborough Community College on Dale Mabry Highway in beautiful Tampa, Florida, right across from Raymond James Stadium, affectionately known as the Harvard by the Highway. Um, I wasn't a very good student, did enough to get by, and took a TV and radio class for no other reason than I figured I watched TV and I listened to radio. That's one I could pass. Um, this was pre-cell phone days. Was taking the class, heard the instructor tell another person about an internship at 970 WFLA in Tampa, and immediately went down to the payphone in the lobby of the school and called WFLA and said, I heard you were looking for an intern. Steve Hall, who was the news director at that time, invited me in for an interview the next day, and the following day I was an intern at 970 WFLA. I don't know what happened to that other guy.
So it's 1989-ish.
Yes, yes.
And what radio stations are you listening to in Tampa?
Q105, man. Scott Shannon, the Q Morning Zoo. You know, he left around that area to go to Z100, so I'm not sure. You know, Cleveland Wheeler, Scott Shannon, that whole thing, and Ron on 95 YNF too were huge then. But yeah, I grew up listening to the Q Zoo in the morning, and Scott Shannon in Cleveland. It was just awesome to listen to that legendary radio station.
So you get into radio, and what are your first jobs?
Newsroom intern, which was basically hang out in the newsroom. 970 WFLA at the time was a robust radio newsroom, something, kind of a thing of the past, with, full-time reporters out covering beats every day. So, taking feeds from them, carting up the network feeds or cuts. The weather, the talk host, it was live local talk all day long, and I'd have to write down the temperatures in the community, different communities in the area, and take them in and slip them to the talk show host so they could do the weather every hour. So all of that kind of stuff. Recording Paul Harvey, taping Paul Harvey every day was huge in Tampa, Florida, where the average age was about 150. They loved them some Paul Harvey, so that was a big deal too.
Seems nuts that we have to explain that newsrooms were once robust, and we actually had to have somebody physically record something like Paul Harvey or, Dick Clark's Rock and Roll Remember and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was a thing. The reporters had their assignments every day. They would go out, call in their reports, feed their reports. I would record them. And that was part of the deal. The anchor was there every hour, putting together a newscast. And I had, sometimes you had to type up the leads, cart up the stuff, type up the cart labels from the news anchors. It was just, part of the deal now, that is a thing of the past now.
How are we going to explain to part of our listenership what carts are?
I still have them on my desk. So, I'm in this weird situation where I'm the old man in the room at Sirius XM. And so I have two cart machines with carts in them on my desk. And every once in a while, I will have to demonstrate and explain, the process of carting something up and, going past the splice and, hoping everything was bulk erased properly, all that stuff. So different world now.
Yet you don't let it go. You keep it on your desk. And I am no different because we're roughly the same age and started in radio at the same time. This is a PBX phone box.
There you go.
When you get the mayor on the phone and you need to record that.
Exactly.
And here are some cassettes, which I have kicking about. So
yes, we have to explain those as well. The cassettes. It's amazing. Although I just read an article, the cassette's like making a comeback. Like vinyl had its moment, and I read somewhere now like people are buying music on cassette again, which is amazing to me.
How'd you get into the Power Pig?
So,
Or how did the Power Pig come about? Because you had a front row seat.
yeah, the transition from newsroom to being able to run the board, my life as a whole, my career is a whole thing of happenstance, right? Happened to hear that person, the professor, tell that other person about the internship. One day I asked if I could watch the guy run the board for the talk shows. I had no idea what that was. I had only worked in the newsroom. So sitting in there for literally an hour and a half, and Mike Sirio, the guy that was in charge of the board operators, said, "Oh, hey, you want to learn how to do this?" And I'm like, "Well, maybe, I don't know." Well, we just had 3 guys quit, so you start this weekend. And I started running Sally, Jesse, Raphael, and Tom Schneider at night. From there, I guess proved my board prowess. So before the Power Pig, the station was Z93, Good Time Oldies. I was asked to come in on the weekend overnights and run the aforementioned Dick Clark's Rock, Roll, and Remember, which came on vinyl. And while I was there, I was to pull the music from the morning show. Now, this was an oldie station. The songs were 2 minutes long, and all the songs were on cart. So each hour had about 14 carts stacked about this high. So you would run Dick Clark's Rock, Roll, and Remember, play the spots, flip over the record, cue the record back up. I'm doing that. Did it for probably a few months. One night, I noticed a bunch of the jocks, the regular jocks, were hanging out on a Sunday night. And there was a meeting apparently going on between the powers that be, Randy Michaels, Gabe Hobbs. I'm not sure if Mark Chase was there at the time. But unbeknownst to me, the meeting concluded with telling the jock staff that they were going to flip the switch to the Power Pig. They went out and spray painted the van pink and black. I was wearing what we called our Good Time Oldies Z shirt, which was a Z93 T-shirt. The jocks who were maybe a little inebriated came in, grabbed me, pinned me against the wall, and spray painted my T-shirt with black spray paint, Power Pig, on it. And the next morning, I believe it was at 10 a.m., they flipped the switch. And I was a member of the Power Pig air staff all of a sudden.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, because I think a lot of people just don't know the story, why was the Power Pig so big?
Well, it has a lot more to do with Q105, right? I mean, Q105 was a monster, and in the day, you know, in an era now where everything is so niche, right? Everybody has their little place they fit. Q105 was everything. They were a full service radio station, news, weather, and sports. They played at night, you know, the latest CHR. Scott Shannon hosted the Oldies Hour at 10 a.m. where they aired an hour of oldies. If there was a country song, you know, that was great, they played the country song. So they were everything to everybody in the community, and they were just ripe for the picking. They were just so big that, you know, there was a place where you could undercut them on the low end and a lot of room to succeed. So and they were a legendary radio station. I mean, Mason Dixon, you know, Scott Cleveland, everybody, Bobby Rich, everybody that had been a part of that station. So the bit was they held they basically you know, called up, and I'm blanking on the guy's name, but one of the big wigs at Eden's Broadcasting at the time. And said, we won't change formats if you pay us $1 million. And they were dead serious. They were dead serious. If Eden's would have written the $1 million check, they would probably still be Good Time Oldies. And basically the attitude was bring it. And the Power Pig launched, and it was everything so opposite of Q105. It was edgy, a little raunchy. the music, everything was pitched up 2%. So everything seemed, faster. The jocks didn't talk a lot. And when they did, it meant something. And it was very in your face. It was, um, basically aired the dirty laundry about Q105 and the reason why they were successful, and all their drama about the morning show not liking the afternoon show and vice versa. It was an open book, and it took hold. People loved it.
Because I think a lot of people who would, look at radio from a, business or, from the flat side of things would just say, we're going to start a top 40 and we're going to go up against them and let's see how much share we can take. But this is different. This is drama, a ransom, renegade radio. I think the word renegade was used often. At the imaging, Bumper Morgan.
Yep.
I think the news was a little bit on edge, like the old 2020 news out of Detroit.
Yeah, we had Martin Giles, the late great Martin Giles, who was one of the best. Just the pipes you wouldn't believe, and the great writing that was, a little bit of, double entendre, wink, wink when he could. Everything you just mentioned. A small band of renegades terrorizing Tampa Bay. That was, that was the sweeper. But the people loved us. We had the thing, flipping the pig, which was the middle finger. And that was a negative, right? And we turned it into a positive. Whenever you see Q105, flip them the pig, let them know. So there's a big parade in town called the Gasparilla Parade. It's a pirate festival. And at the parade, Q105 had Belinda Carlisle on their float in the parade. This is when she was in her Mad About You, heyday. And so we went on the air and, whenever you see Q105, flip them the pig. And no one include Belinda into this. And she's up and down the parade route, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people are giving her the middle finger. And she was very upset. I feel bad for poor Belinda in hindsight. But it wasn't a great day for her. No fault of her own, by the way. But yeah, that was the thing. It was just something people could rally around, and it fit the 90s. It wouldn't work now, right? Just a different time and place. But for that moment and that time, man, it was awesome.
Yeah, and musically, you said skewed younger, and it got a little rhythmic in there too, right?
Oh, for sure.
So you mentioned pitched up. The music is faster paced. And you don't need to play Belinda Carlisle to be a success. Q105 did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they were built upon being everything to everyone. And, we found, especially at the beginning, now the music was a little more broad at the beginning. Like there was Aerosmith and Def Leppard alongside, Paul Abdul and Milli Vanilli. It sort of, got narrowed in there for a while, and the music changed in the I don't know what year it was, 93, 94, when the grunge thing started happening. We played some Pearl Jam and stuff like that as well, but musically it was just totally different, and they threw some stuff in there. Clarence Carter's Strokin', was not a song of the time, but it was a song that hadn't been played on the radio, and it was edgy, and people liked it. It was funny. The butt EU, that sort of stuff. So yeah, the music was so narrow, it just was the right sort of spot. And the problem with, and I apologize, I'm jumping ahead, Q105, the mistake they made was taking us head on. If they'd have just done what they did and kept on going, they'd have been fine. But they changed our music, changed their music to try to be us, and it didn't work for them. It wasn't what their audience wanted.
How long did it take for the pig to pass them?
I think it was 73 days.
Yeah.
Something like that. This was, our diary method, book every 3 months sort of deal, right? So yeah, I think it was the second or third book. We were ahead of them.
And the other crazy thing, maybe it's not so crazy now, it seems brilliant, but it's always like, well, don't talk about your competition. But you were only talking about your competition, and it
Oh,
must have sent them nuts.
oh, it was, I mean, it created a soap opera around them. We had, we did these bits when Clear Channel bought them. Lowry Mays, was low rent mayonnaise, and it was voiced by the late great Brian James. And it was airing all their dirty laundry, that we knew about. And the reason we knew about it, by the way, is we sent people over to dig through their dumpsters. We were actually dumpster diving and bringing home their trash and digging through their memos and all that stuff. That's legitimately happened. The other thing we did, we had on our board, we had Q105 and Q. So we could punch up Q105 anytime we wanted. And we had a double punch cart, Bumper Morgan voicing it. It's a fact. Q105 plays the most commercials. Check them out. We'll wait. And there was silence on that for, 5-10 seconds. And then we'd play, the Power Pig plays the most music and go right into a song. And on the window of the studio, we had a grease pencil, and every time we caught him, we added another tick mark. So it was all out in your face, no rules, doing what you needed to do. They would do street patrols, prize patrols, announce where they were at, and they'd be giving out Q105 T-shirts, and we would follow them, go across the street, and tell people to bring their Q105 T-shirts to us, and we would have these screw stickers that would go through the Q105 logo, or depending on the time, we had Screw the Q T-shirts, which was their logo with a screw on it and our logo on the back.
Okay, so that bit I stole.
Yeah, good. Well, I have a saying personally: if you've stolen from me, you've stolen twice. So, feel free. And anybody listening, feel free to take that one as well. But it was huge. They were giving away thousands of dollars. Our bit was we didn't have the money. So here's a pig buck. We had a dollar bill that we put a little sticker on where George Washington's face was, and gave people $1. And they were just as happy. So it was different.
What was the moment when you stopped identifying as the pig? I think it was just 93.3 after that.
Yeah.
Probably well after you conquered the format and you didn't need to be the pig anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, at some point, the attitude was capping the revenue, right? There were some people that the numbers we were bringing in warranted us making a lot more revenue than we were, but there were some people that were just staying away because of the edginess. So the decision was made from Power 93 to Power Pig to 93.3 FLZ, the New Music Revolution. Funny story, I was the jock on the air when the change happened. We were going to change in the morning show, and so BJ Harris, who was the PD at the time, came in. All right, man, go ahead and start with the 93.3 stuff. First record I, talked up 93.3, the New Music Revolution, blah, blah, blah. And, and locked it out with right here on Power 93, the Power Pig. Oh! So that's why I knew the career as a jock wasn't long. I wasn't long for that career.
And this is why you pivoted over to sports. That guy who launched 93.3, we're going to move him to sports.
Yeah, well, it was a little more than that, but yeah.
So you cross the street for that?
No. So I was producing the morning show. I was the third wheel on the morning show, MJ and BJ, and I was stunt guy, which was great. I was having a blast, and creating theater of the mind, and I was sort of the punchline guy on the morning show. MJ Kelly, BJ Harris, and me, and if I'm being honest, MJ was difficult to work with. I have all the respect in the world for MJ, Todd Schnitt. He's a talented dude. I was down in Tampa a couple of weeks ago and listened to him and Fester on Q105, which ironic there. But he was just difficult to work with, and I had had enough. And they, I think they were afraid I was going to go across the street. Um, I was um, I was paid to sit home for quite a bit. They told me sit tight. They were going to have something for me. I had always helped out in the sports department, the news talk station. I went to cover Bucks games and the like to help out. Their sports operation was one man, so they could always use the help, and it was something I enjoyed. So sitting on the sidelines for a while, and they had one day the phone rang. Actually, I was sitting on the sidelines. My job was once a week. I had to call Gabe Hobbs, who was the operations manager, and ask him if I could come into work that week. Every Monday, 9 o'clock. Hey, Gabe, can I come into work today? No, not this week. Eventually, they launched. They flipped 1250 WDAE to sports. Hey, Gabe, can I come into work today? Yes, you can. And here's what we want you to do. And that's where it started.
But I mean, sports in Tampa Bay, now you're coming out with a station. It's 1996-ish.
Yeah.
And sports radio is, it's kind of in its infancy. If I think back to, WFAN starting, in the decade previous, it's not a full-blown format, but it is a good direction. And Tampa Bay itself has a new hockey team that's 3 years old. There's no baseball team then, I don't think.
Nope.
But there's still lots of sports around, and you'll have enough content. So when you're walking into this new format and they say this is your new job, what are you seeing, and how did you think it was going to play out for radio?
I didn't know what I was doing. It was like, oh, you're the program director. Actually, I was the assistant program director of the sports station. I asked Gabe, who am I assisting? Nobody. So in the most Clear Channel of all Clear Channel ways, I was the assistant program. I was getting the assistant programmer rate to assist no one. But the broader question is, look, it was a Bucks town. That's what people cared about. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whether they were winning, losing, it didn't matter. That was what was important. So the idea was just, build as much content around the Bucks as humanly possible. The phrase "best Bucks coverage" was just something that we jumped on. I think they used that in Cincinnati with the Bengals. Or J-Cor did at the time. Yeah, that was the deal. And it was personality radio too. You got to remember, Tampa was a personality radio hotbed. I mentioned Ron and Ron and the Q Zoo. People, they wanted personality, and we had guys like Steve Dumig, who was just a lightning rod, the old school yell and scream sports guy, and he did it as well as anybody. We had Chris Thomas, who was a local sports anchor who was beloved. Just a man of the people. So it was personality and Bucks, and that's what we did.
Who was calling Tampa Bay games back in '96?
I believe they were still on the country station at that time, Q105 or WQIK. So I'm not sure. It was maybe Gene Deckerhoff was still doing it and doing the play-by-play at the time. They had run through a bunch of folks. Pro wrestler Jesse the Body Ventura was in there with Gene at some point. So they had run through a bunch of people, but they settled on Gene. I think he had started around that time.
So you got the Lightning. What's Tampa Bay Storm?
Arena football.
Oh, that's right.
So the Tampa Bay Storm was one of the most successful franchises in that league. They started playing at what now is Tropicana Field and would regularly put 25,000 people in there for an arena football game. Their coach, Tim Markham, was the Vince Lombardi of arena football. ended up winning like 8 championships, in that league. So they were a legit. I mean, look, they weren't a ratings play for the radio station, but as far as a night out in Tampa Bay, um, arena football was legit.
And the Florida Gators, who play up in Gainesville, which is a bit of a drive, but still a very hot property in that area.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, the Gators were the number one college school. There's the big three: Florida, Florida State, Miami. But, without a doubt, the Gators were the one. And they were difficult to get because the competing sports station in town, um, was I know I've mentioned Clear Channel and J-Core and all this stuff, but there was a lot of movement and people buying people and stations shifting around. But um, Clear Channel, well, basically the Gators rights were owned by the other company. Let's put it that way. And and so we couldn't get them. We couldn't get and we couldn't get play by play for the Bucks. Rays weren't a thing yet. Eventually, we did end up getting the Lightning, and we had the Storm, the arena football. So we were doing it without the number one play by play.
So you started at 12:50 a.m. You were part of the transition that went to 6:20 a.m. The call letters are still very popular in Tampa Bay. I mean, you must have stories about, when you listen to 95.3 WDAE, you must be able to say, I was there at the beginning.
Yeah, that's my thing, and yeah, I'm John Momola over there. I've gotten to know a little bit, and I've had a relationship with every PD that's been at WDAE since it flipped to sports. And one of the things I kind of pride myself with, there's probably one or two exceptions now, but I can walk into the door of any place that I worked and be welcome. And that's something I take personal pride in. Maybe Detroit, not so much. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit, so I've had relationship with those folks, and yeah, it's a sense of pride. We moved 1250 WDAE to 620 AM, which was WSUN at the time, and moved the call letters there. Just a rockin' signal that could be heard all across the state. I remember traveling for an arena football game at one point, where we landed in Baton Rouge Airport, and we had to drive to New Orleans, and was listening to a Rays game on WDAE, driving to the game from between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. So it was a huge, huge signal, huge move. And now they're on FM and, all that good stuff. But yeah, man, it is a point of pride. I was there from the start, and, help lay the foundation, I hope, from to what it's been now. And it is the go-to, the sports station of record in that market still.
Well, I've had John on this show twice.
Oh, wow.
So
look at that.
yeah, I mean,
two-timer.
Well, exactly. So, I mean,
Yeah.
probably because it's one of the stations that I, will listen to for sports
Right.
for whatever reason. Because it's like, well, I think I'll listen to a sports station. I go to that one because it happens to be, the one I know.
There you go. Well, John's done a wonderful job with that, and now I guess he's overseeing FLA as well on the news talk side. So, great work by him.
And you yourself made a transition from radio, and I want to say you kind of left radio, but you didn't really. You went to go work with the Lightning, I think.
Yeah. So I was doing Tampa Bay Storm games. Rock Riley, who's the sports director of the two stations of FLA and DAE, was the color man for the Storm games, the arena football. His wife was about to have a baby. We gave him the week off. I filled in for him, and I liked it so much I didn't give him the job back. So I went over and did that for a whole bunch of years. Lightning and the Storm, while not as part of the same ownership group, they had a relationship. We got the Storm or the Lightning rights. And basically the deal was the Lightning, we negotiated with them. The Lightning was taking their rights in-house, which meant they would produce all the programming, buy the time from us, sell the spots, and that's how it would go. So we did. Gabe Hobbs was the lead on the deal, and I helped. on the programming side, putting things together. Deal was done. A couple of weeks later, phone rings from the Michael Yormark, who was at the Lightning, the VP of sales. I forget his title. Um, and basically, Michael was like, "Well, we got to produce all this programming now. We need somebody to oversee it for us. What's your interest?" And it was high just because a chance to work for a pro sports team. And I think the fine folks at Palace Sports and Entertainment who own the Lightning had an overinflated idea of how much a sports radio program director in Tampa, Florida made, because when they made me the offer, it was significantly more dollars than my friends at Clear Channel were paying me. Um, they made it a no-brainer. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's not even really that far of a jump. It's just really, how the money is exchanged between the properties. You essentially become the program director to what is the biggest sports property. I mean, because you had to produce, and there was in-house sales. There's all sorts of stuff you had to do.
Yeah, I had been doing the pre and post game shows for the Lightning as an employee of the radio station. That was strictly budgetary. We had the original deal we had called for us to provide that, and there was no one else to do it. So literally, I would do the pre and post game. We had a place wired up outside the dressing rooms to do the intermission interviews. Since I had to be gone all the time, I recruited my wife to produce that. She worked cheap. So yeah, we were just doing what needed to be done. So they had a relationship with me. But yeah, the shift was easy. Now I did have a television component to that I oversaw, that I wasn't all too familiar with. But I had to learn that business as well. But yeah, the job was program director. It was creating content. It was working with the sales team. Hey, we've got a client, they need an in-game feature. What can we give them? That sort of thing. Working with the talent, coaching the talent, hiring talent, all that fun stuff, and then producing the broadcast. The difference and the biggest thing was, for me, the competitive factor. Like, every 3 months we'd get those ratings come across, and were we up, were we down, did we win, did we lose? The hardest adjustment for me was I could have executed the best broadcast in the world on any given night, and if the team lost 4-0, that broadcast sucked. I could have had the worst night on the air possible, and if we won 2-1, it was a great night. So that was the biggest adjustment for me, is what we did failed in comparison to the performance of the team on the ice. And by the way, at that time there were a lot more 4-0 losses than there were 2-0 wins, so it was difficult at times.
So I look back in that time that you worked there in the 2000s, and you're an employee of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Are you signed to an NDA to never admit that the Game 6 goal that Calgary scored was in the net?
Oh, it was a legit goal. I mean, it was a legit no goal, I should say. It never went in.
Yeah, okay.
I've seen show me an angle that says the puck went in, and I will change it, but I have not seen one. I tell you what, though, that playoffs was just amazing. The two series before that in Montreal, part of my gig was for the road playoff games. I was in the booth, and I would go down in the third period and then conduct the on ice interviews locker room interviews post game. And I remember there was a game against Montreal. We were down by 1 late, and we scored to tie it up late. And the memory for me of that was, I have never been in a place that went from so loud, I mean, just so loud, to dead silent, to you could hear a pin drop when we scored to tie it up. And then a minute later, we scored to win the game. And it was just, amazing. But that final series in Calgary, man, hard to beat.
Okay, so I was in Montreal at that time in
Yes.
2004. I'm a
Yes.
Habs fan,
Oh,
and I have
sorry.
successfully eliminated all that from my memory.
Yeah. Who was it? It was Vinny Lecavalier scored one, and I don't remember the order of it. Maybe Richard scored the other. One was right off a draw. It was, yeah, it was amazing. Honestly, if you take yourself out of it, and I know the fandom, but literally amazing, not the athletic accomplishment, but what happened in that arena went from here to way down here in a moment. So my apologies. Worked out for me though.
Yeah, and at the same time, Vinny Lecavalier, who is
Yeah.
from Montreal,
Yes.
and everybody's kind of like, "Damn, I wish he played for us."
Every year. Every year that was the trade rumors, right? Vinny to, but he didn't want to. Why? Why would you want that pressure?
Yeah,
And it came later, same with Marty St. Louis. Um, but yeah, that was always an interesting dynamic when we went to Montreal. I didn't travel all the time, but every couple of months I'd go on a road trip, and then all during the playoffs. And it was always interesting when we went to Montreal, because no matter what, there was that, when's Vinny going to come here? We're going to trade for Vinny, this, that, and the other thing, and it just never was meant to be.
no, and it's exactly what you said. And even up to 2 days ago, even last night, I saw an exchange between a reporter in Edmonton and Tim Peel, the referee. They were going back and forth, and the reporter asked a question. Tim said that's a dumb question, and this is why free agents don't come to Canada, because they're under the microscope, and instead they could go be in Tampa Bay, be the number 3 or 4 sports entity in the market, live in peace. Their families are happier. It's not like you have to like abandon your family and go on a road trip and say, "Oh, honey, take care of things in Winnipeg while I go and
Right.
to Arizona and to Anaheim and to Tampa on a road trip."
Hmm.
That's not good for relationships.
Yeah, yeah. And I will tell you this though, the Lightning right now are not the number three. They are probably as 1A. The Bucks and the Lightning are right there, and obviously the Bucks with Brady, had definitely a higher profile, but Lightning have done a lot of winning lately. Um,
Yeah, and when I think of those markets, Tampa Bay really is the exception for the hockey
yeah,
markets. It can
yeah,
easily be 1 or 2,
yeah,
depending on the year, and often is. It's not like across the swamp there in Florida,
right.
where it is perennially a
Yeah,
4 or 5.
means nothing. Yeah, means nothing. But Tampa's a hockey market, and winning a bunch of cups will do that. And um, people love their Lightning, and those players are stars. And I do want to say something. I mentioned earlier that one of my points of pride is I can walk in almost any place that I've ever worked previously. The Lightning as an organization treat their alumni, not just the players, but the people who worked there. When we won the cup, Tim Taylor was our assistant captain, and the speech he gave in the locker room was, "Today we walk together forever." That's what he told everybody. And that has applied not just to the players, but to the front office staff as well. I'm there. Not many people that I worked with back then are still there, but I can make a phone call any day of the year. They were here in DC last season. Brought my son to the game. Was down in the locker room afterwards, and Braden Point, Steve Stamkos, Kucherov, all posing for pictures, signing autographs with my kids for no other reason than I was, an alumni of the team and worked there. But that organization, Mr. Venick, just first class, top to bottom, and that's just not a me thing. That's anybody from that time is welcome. And it's one of those things with sports. A lot of times you can draw a direct line from the top and how they manage the organization to what happens on the field. And here in DC, the Commanders with Dan Snyder, you can draw the line in the other direction as well. But the Lightning under Mr. Vinnick, just an incredible organization.
Why'd you go back to radio?
Missed the competition. I missed the day-to-day competition. I had that itch. Um, and that's probably it. There was a lot of stress too. So my job expanded. I went from just being the broadcast guy to overseeing game operations. So like everything that happened in the arena, on the jumbotron, on the ice, in between the whistles, was all under my purview, and that included the sales side, all that stuff. We had put up a new scoreboard in the arena. That was my project. I'm a radio dude. I don't know anything about building scoreboards, okay? We had a consultant there, and this was a deadline. Like, we were told what usually was a process that's a 2-year process, we took care of in one off season. And I was not sleeping. I had to get that project over the hump by the time they dropped the puck for the first preseason game. That scoreboard had to light up and at the very minimum have a clock, scores, and penalty clock on it. And that was stressful as hell. I went, basically a whole off season not sleeping. So combine that with my desire I was a radio guy, man, and to get back into it, and started kind of sniffing around, reached out to Rick Scott, the consultant, asked him if there was anything going on, and things kind of happened from there.
Did you go back to the same frequency in the same company, and maybe it didn't change hands, or?
No, I went to Jacksonville from there. I went to 1010XL in Jacksonville. Met Steve Griffin, the GM, drove to Orlando, met him at the Peabody Hotel, watched the Ducks walk by at the Peabody Hotel, and basically hammered out an agreement there. That was a very unique radio station, not owned by a corporation, owned by a group of local investors. Frank Frangie, the afternoon host, who is a dear friend of mine, now to this day, basically wrangled this group of local people, sold them on how they could make money doing sports radio, and got them to buy a station, and that one's still there, going strong today as well.
So Jacksonville's a weird place for sports because, well, the Jags are there, and what else goes on up there?
Florida Gators are the home team, man.
Yeah,
that was it. Gators football, to a lesser extent basketball. Another weird quirk of that market, some of the resort sports, golf, the PGA is headquartered there in Ponte Vedra. Golf moves the needle. The Players Championship happens every year there, and that's a huge event. But the Florida Georgia game in Jacksonville every year is a huge event. So yeah, Jags were definitely big. But 1 and 1A were Gators and Jags all the time.
Just a question from before. So Aiden, if you're editing this, I'm just going to ask this to be wound back a little bit into the Montreal area. Jason, did you ever get a chance to go to Chez Paré in Montreal?
Oh, yeah. As it was known in the hockey circuit, the ballet. You would go to the ballet. I'm going to tell you one of the stories. So John Cullen played for the Lightning. This was before the Cup year. He had a battle with cancer, and had to step aside for a season to treat. I think it was the same thing Mario had, the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And it was just a feel-good story. The team wore a little clover, 4-leaf clover with his number 7 in the middle of it on their jerseys. And, all year we did stories on Cully's, progression and all that stuff. And thank God he was able to beat it, come back the next year. But yeah, we ended up going to the ballet one night, and who's there? A bunch of the team and John Cullen. And it was like, you'd done all these great feel-good stories, and there's the guy you'd done all the great feel-good stories about at the ballet. Just was a little weird, a little different. But yeah, that was a spot. That and Gibby's, the steakhouse. That's like, it's a old stable or something, like a military stables. That was our spots.
Yeah, Gibby's is on Douville, down in Old Montreal.
Yep.
And where the old ladies will come out and feed you up with salad and garlic bread, and then your steak arrives, and you're practically already full.
But yeah, it's funny. You go to town, and you end up going to the same spots, and Gibby's was one of them. I'm not going to talk about how regular the ballet was, but yes, people went. I hear.
I have a story about the ballet.
Okay, let me hear it.
So Whitey Herzog, when the Cardinals would play in Montreal against the Expos, and it was a weekend series, generally the afternoon game, and then you fly out that night to go to the next place. Not when you went to Montreal. That Sunday night, they would stay the extra night, go to the ballet, and they would fly out the next morning.
Isn't the rumor that that's where Mario Lemieux met his wife, at the ballet? For legal purposes, that's allegedly. But I thought that was the rumor at some point, or at least I had heard.
We would not be allowed to speak that way in Canada about this.
Yeah. I mean, she's probably, I don't know Mrs. Lemieux. She's probably a fine young lady. But that was the rumor.
And then you found your way up to Raleigh.
Yes.
Again, another market where, the sports stations are popping up. The sports is beginning to take hold. Hockey had moved down around the same time, 96 from Hartford. Mm-hmm. Carolina got an expansion team in the early 90s, and now we're into sports radio in that market.
Yeah, and so I've found that like my niche in sports radio was working for stations and garnering ratings and revenue for stations that didn't have the number one play-by-play, right? We didn't have the Jags or the Gators in Jacksonville. We didn't have the Bucks in Tampa. In Raleigh, we did have the Canes, but they weren't number one. It was the colleges. That was, a college town. We had Duke, which from a broadcast perspective was the number 3 after Carolina and NC State. NC State was on our sister station, which was an AC station. Again, much like Q105 in Tampa, WRAL FM, simulcasted the 6 o'clock news from WRAL TV. They aired North Carolina State football and basketball. They were full service AC. So didn't have North Carolina or NC State. We had Duke, which was number 3, and we had the Canes, which, at that point they were in a run of not making the playoffs and not very successful. So yeah, it was totally different market, by the way. Mike and Mike were our morning show and did gangbusters for us there. Afternoon show, Adam Gold, Joe Ovius, 2 extremely talented guys who were perfect for that market. Had their fingers on the pulse of what was moving the needle. Could talk college, could talk hockey, could talk Carolina Panthers when needed. David Glenn did middays, and he was almost an NC State historian, or a triangle sports historian in a way. So yeah, that was a hugely successul radio station, and got to credit Brian Maloney, the general manager there, who recently retired, but he was a guy that got it, a general manager that absolutely knew what it took to get numbers and generate revenue in that market. So awesome spot.
It kind of makes sense though for your niche to be, the number 2 or number 3 property that you could come in, because it's kind of like how you got started with the Power Pig, right? You know how to work from below to get to above.
Yeah. And, I don't think in the moment, I realized that's what I was doing. Like I didn't consciously say, no, I'm going to turn down this station with all the number 1 play-by-plays and go to work with this one who has none of them. But yeah, I feel as though, at the time I didn't know it, but in hindsight, yeah, okay, that's what I was doing, in the moment you're just trying to, claw and scratch and do what you need to do.
There's a bit of an advantage, though, when you don't have sports rights in the building, and that's you can put personalities on the air who can speak a little more candidly about the sports team
Yeah.
And as well, you don't have as much money out, so you've got some more money to market with as well. So there are a few advantages when you're not doing play by play.
Yeah, for sure. It did take off some of the shot, and not that I can ever remember us like going hard after a team. It just didn't make sense because you still needed them. Um, but it did allow you to go a step further. I've always used the mantra: be critical but fair. If you're going to be critical, give the team the opportunity to respond. And they appreciated that. As a program director, I had relationships with the PR guys. It wasn't day to day. We weren't talking every day, but I always made sure they knew who I was and how to find me. So if there ever was that little, stuff being on the edge and maybe upsetting them, we could talk it through and not have it be a larger issue. Didn't always work, but yeah, and it's for the marketing, yeah, and you had to be creative. You had to be creative, find ways to attach yourself to that sport, that team, that event that everybody cares about without officially being attached to it. And that challenged you creatively, promotionally, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, the resources, there probably were a little extra resources there because of that.
All right, what happened in Detroit?
Had to bring that one up. Um, so in Raleigh, get a call from Fred Jacobs, who I've known Fred a little bit. Love tech survey is one of my favorite things, every year. I'm a research geek. So even to this day, I love it. Fred said he wants to talk about sports radio. Knew I'd been around. With sports radio, it's funny. There's this group of OG sports radio PDs, that were the original group, and there's still a few of us alive and kicking. And so I just thought, hey, maybe Fred's just picking my. Basically, he was interviewing me for the job in Detroit. I spent an hour on the phone with Fred. Um, so. Um, After that conversation with Fred, um, got a phone call. I'm trying to think whether it was Rick Scott. Yeah, it was from Rick Scott, the consultant, who said, "I'm going to send you an NDA you need to sign, and then we need to. I want to talk to you about something." So they lay out the plan for Detroit. They had a relationship pounded out with ESPN Radio, which at the time I didn't care about the content, the programming content, as much as I did the play-by-play, because I knew we weren't going to have any to start. But at least we could say we had, MLB, the NBA Finals, that sort of thing. Um, and they had a deal with Drew Lane, um, who had been, the longtime morning guy at Riff, to come in and do afternoon on the sports station. So, man, Detroit, bigger market, try the chance to launch something from scratch, um, was something too much to pack up. Brian Maloney, my GM in Raleigh, was from Detroit. Went in there and talked to him. Brian, I got this opportunity, man. I don't think I could pass it up. And he was 1,000,000% supportive of that. Totally understood. Um, and, was teary eyed when I left Raleigh, because I truly believe I could still be the program director in Raleigh today if if I wanted to be. That company, Capital Broadcasting in Raleigh, the best broadcast company you'll ever work for in your life. The Goodman family, just awesome. So get up to Detroit. Um, Basically, Drew Lane was the only one that was hired. Matt Derry, who worked at the Ticket as I think an update guy and pregame host for the Pistons. He had been hired to do midday, but his non-compete hadn't run out yet. So we were going to launch with Mike and Colin. God bless those guys. They were never going to get any numbers in Detroit.
Colin Cowherd.
Colin Cowherd.
Yeah.
Drew in afternoons, and eventually Matt Derry in middays. Had to hire, that was it. No promotions people, no, nobody, no board operators, no producers, nothing. They brought me up there, sat me in a hotel lobby, set up a bunch of interviews, and spent all day for 2 straight days interviewing people, developing a staff, not knowing anything about anything, right? And so my strategy was to hire good people first. And I figured if I hired good people, we'd have a good staff, and then worry about all the radio stuff. Um, we launched, and that was probably the highlight.
So,
um,
yeah, listen,
yeah.
in my head, I can hear this not working, but I know you have to take that gig.
Oh yeah. The taking the gig was the no-brainer. Um, Getting there and realizing what was really happening. Um, Drew Lane, talented guy. Um, had no business doing a show on a sports radio station. The concept of Drew being successful, recreating the morning show he did at Riff, afternoons on a sports station, was never going to work. And
Would it
part of
have
it's his
would it have worked better if he'd done the morning show?
no, no.
Okay.
Part of it was Drew didn't want to change. We tried to work with Drew um, to be Drew, do his show, but realize who he was talking to. Like, I think the idea was this flood of Riff listeners were just going to show up in afternoons to listen to Drew because he was Drew. And that never happened. So when that never happened, and we had billboards, Drew is back, blah, 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 built a lot around Drew Lane. And he, don't get me wrong, he was the highest thing on the radio station, right? But wasn't enough. And he didn't evolve. And look, I've dealt with a lot of difficult personalities in my life, and he was one of them. And I'm not saying anything I don't think Drew would say. And Drew, I don't think I'm not on Drew's Christmas card list either. But he didn't want to change. Um, and it was weird because the hole in the market was doing sports. Like over on the ticket, they were doing the Tom Bigby stuff. They were talking as much about potholes as they were the Tigers, and that sort of thing. And the hole in the market was sports. Like, let's talk about the Lions and the Tigers, and to an extent, the Pistons and the Wings. Um, and we did that. We did that when we could, which was basically middays. We had Mike and Mike in the mornings. That wasn't going to work. And, all credit to Mike and Mike. They came to the market twice during a short period of time to try to make it work. Did remotes for us. So credit to them. But yeah, it just, there were so many things wrong. And all the while, the station was for sale. Um, you know, so we had, I want to be diplomatic, but I think the statute of limitations has run out. Um, we had Buzz Knight, genius when it comes to rock radio, done no sports radio. Rick Scott, who I love to death, and I got so much, to say about all the great things Rick Scott was doing. He was proposing things that would work for him in other markets, but worked at stations that were in another stage of their development. We needed Cume in Detroit. We had TSL. Our TSL was better than the ticket. We just didn't have enough people. And it's like, I just need, bring me people to get under my tent, and I'll get them to stay, right? That's my job. I just need help getting people under the tent. So some of the suggestions, the general manager, I've worked for a lot of great general managers. The general manager there wasn't one of them. And I'm trying not to sound like bitter radio guy, because it all worked out for me. It was a means to an end for me. So I'm not bitter at all, but these are just the facts. And look, I'll share. I was the captain of the ship. I'll share my responsibility too for it's not being successful. But it just, that you take in all of those factors, sales department that was used to selling rock radio. Yeah, it just wasn't going to work.
What I know from everything you've told me, and in that market, Detroit, this sounds like it's going to be very difficult. You know, Colin Cowherd, for instance, you now have a wasteland in the middle, and there's nothing. Colin's my favorite show. Yeah, I know. I didn't know you could do that, by the way.
I did a gesture, I think.
You gave thumbs down to my comment.
Yeah. I didn't mean that. Colin, I love. Colin's a great guy. 2 thumbs up for Colin.
Yeah. But he's not going to be talking about Detroit unless he wants to talk about how dysfunctional the Lions are. He'll never talk about the Red Wings. He's not going to talk about baseball unless it's like July, which he takes most of it off. And your morning show is Mike and Mike, which I think is a good morning show. And I guess what I would ask for you right now, because I kind of miss the era. I mean, how did that show land for America? Because I remember, it was Mike Greenberg and Mike Golick, right?
Yep.
And then they had this chemistry. I listened to the show. It worked. And then one day they broke up.
It was Good Morning America. It was the Today Show for sports. And my experience was it worked awesome in medium markets that didn't have, a college town like Raleigh, that didn't have MLB where there was a game every night to talk about, or the NBA or NHL where there was a game every night. So it worked well there because they were, they used the resources of ESPN effectively and brought in, their reporters and guests and everybody who worked on that staff to discuss sports at, that high macro level. And then you localized it with your local updates and stuff when you could. So yeah, it was a generic, non-risky, they were never going to say anything to get you in trouble, which may have been probably the only flaw in that show. When it was time to be critical, they weren't critical enough. But yeah, they were a great team, a Hall of Fame team, and you'll have to ask them about the dynamics of the breakup. I've heard things, but they went their separate ways, and that was that. And frankly, ESPN struggled to recapture that lightning in the bottle a little bit. Now my guy Evan Cohen's doing the morning show there now, who is awesome. I love Evan to death. So hopefully he'll, have a ton of success there.
Your time in Detroit sounds like my time in Montreal, where there was a lot of people who had a lot of advice about the people that the listeners already had their mind made up on.
Yeah. In hindsight, look, it just was never going to work. And poor Dave Shore came in after me. Scott Masteller was put in a weird spot as they brought him in as kind of a consultant, and their intention was to offer him the job, offer him my job while I was still in the seat and while he was sitting across from the desk consulting with me. And Scott and I are friends, so that was weird. But whoever was in the PD chair was not going to have success. There was just so many factors going against that radio station, and a great staff, by the way. Ryan Armani, Rico Beard. Rico's doing well with Valenti now on the ticket. Matt Derry was great. Drew was on an island, man. That was the other thing. Drew wasn't part of our staff. Like, Drew would show up at things when he had to, and the rest of the staff resented that a little bit. Hey, we're going out for beers tonight. And Drew wasn't there. But yeah, look, I don't want to come across as bitter, because I'm not. I'm so far removed from that, and it's led to a wonderful thing at Sirius XM. But it was a disaster.
So I don't have any Sirius XM subscription. My only experience with it is when I rent a car. And it's always been a good experience.
Yes.
It really feels to me like Sirius XM is what radio used to be.
It is from a sports. Yes.
I'll start
From
from
a
the music side because
yeah.
that's what I listen to when I listen to something like Octane, or if I listen to just one of the music channels. It kind of feels like radio.
Yeah, and I think there is a desire. There's a generation out there that had to make their own playlist, right? Um, that's work. And a lot of times people are tuning to the radio to relax, to not work. And I think we're seeing things shifting from I'm going to make my own playlist. I don't care what the DJ on the radio plays. A little bit back to hey, let's get some smart people to curate music for us and feed it to us, right? Look, you can listen to any song you want now on demand in a moment. But yeah, it's jocks, sweepers, and music. Short talk breaks. And usually the jocks, our 90s on 9 channel is Downtown Julie Brown and Lisa Loeb. Our 80s on 8 channel is the MTV VJs. So, the jocks have a little cachet. And oh, by the way, I should mention my guy Spider Harrison now on 90s on 9 doing some stuff. But the jocks have some cachet. And it's just giving the people what they want, human curated music. And I think there's still something there with that.
So, how did the opportunity to become the director of sports programming come to you? And what does it entail exactly? Like these are the conversations that I've always wanted to have with you at the bar at whether it's, Podcast Movement or any of the radio events where I've seen you. I've always wanted to have this. Like, my God, it sounds huge.
So Detroit ends, and this is where I'll give greater media credit. We had sent nasty grams back and forth, right? You're not performing, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, yeah, well, contractually, you said you were going to do this and you haven't. So that was happening, right? Eventually, I went up to the GM, Steve Chisari, and said, look, you don't want me here. I don't want to be here. Let's figure this out. I said, my kids are in school until July. I don't remember what month this was, but my kids are in school till July. You pay me until July. I'll go away. You hire whoever you want to hire, but I'll be a resource for you and help you out however I can in the interim. And they said, that's a good idea. Then that afternoon, I had papers in my hand and was packing up my desk. So that happens. And, my approach was it's time to immediately start the job search. My job now is to find the next job. Applied a bunch of places. I won't get into specifics of who I talked to and all that stuff. But Taylor Zarzer, who now is part of the management team on our PGA channel. But he was doing college sports radio at the time and maybe a show on the Golf Channel as well. He used to do afternoons in Charlotte, and we simulcasted that Charlotte show on our radio station in Raleigh. So I had a little bit of a relationship with Taylor. So I saw Sirius XM was hiring different positions in the sports department, not the one that I got hired for. So I called Taylor and I said, hey, Taylor, I'm not asking you to put in a word for me, right? All I'd ask is that if you could just make sure my stuff gets on the desk of the person that's making the decision, who I didn't know at the time. Taylor said, you know what, I'll do my best. Within a couple of days, I got a call from Steve Cohen, who was the former senior VP of sports at Sirius XM, one of the smartest sports radio guys I've ever met. And he's now a consultant for us. Well, it was his assistant that called me to set up the call, got on the phone with Steve, and we just shot the breeze about sports for an hour. I was the voice of the arena football team in Tampa. He did a season calling arena football games in New Jersey for the New Jersey Red Dogs. Talked about different, philosophies of sports. Just not an interview, just shooting the breeze. And it was an awesome conversation. It ended with Robert will be in touch. We want to bring you up to New York. The next week, I was in New York City. Brian Hamilton, who was a VP at the time, Chris Eno, met with me first in New York. Um, sat sat down with Steve Cohen, started talking, and he started asking me about all these different sports. NASCAR. I'm like, well, I grew up in Florida. You know, whether you're a NASCAR fan or not, the Daytona 500 is kind of in your blood. That's a thing there, and I became a NASCAR fan. I enjoyed it. Golf. My time in Jacksonville played into golf. Football. I'm a huge football fan. I've been a high school football official for 18 years now. So I love the game of football. We just went back and forth. Um, he said, after the initial meeting, I met with Scott Greenstein for a hot minute. Scott was awesome. Scott's just such a smart guy when it comes to knowing what works in our business. Went back to Steve's office, and he said, you're hired. And I'm like, okay, what's the job? Like, and he said, to help make us better. So that's what I want you to do, is help make us better. Got in the car on the way home, called my wife, and I'm like, well, and he hired me to go to DC, the DC office. I called my wife, said, we're moving to Washington, DC. She's like, what? Yeah, they hired me. Well, what are you doing? I said, I really don't know. Steve just told me he wants to help make us better. That was the mission. And got the offer letter. The job title was director of sports programming in Washington, D.C. And showed up there and went to work. That was that. And not really much of a job description to follow. It was just go to work.
I mean, it's kind of like managing, a bunch of podcasts, as it were. Like, we had Brian Goldmark on from Locked On, and that's what he does. He manages like all these properties for, podcasts in various markets, but just one of. Yeah. And here you are, you've got channels, but they're channels of things that you've worked in before, because you, as you mentioned, golf. You have experience with the SEC, and there's a channel for that. Yeah. You know about talent, and, Mad Dog has his own channel, I believe. Right. So you've got all this stuff, and NASCAR was another one. Obviously, a ton of NHL experience. So I guess it all makes sense. I'm not here to rehire you for your job again, right. But yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and what I found was all of we've got a smart group of programmers. One of the awesome things about Sirius XM is the first desires to promote from within, right? That's the mantra there is, do we have someone in our house that can do the job? And a lot of our program directors came up within the system of Sirius XM and never worked in terrestrial radio and didn't have some of those life experiences, from a professional standpoint that you get when you're a PD for a sports station. And I think that was some of the color that I was able to provide for them, is here's how we've done it in other places, and adjusting it to what fits in satellite, because the mission is different for satellite radio. But the most difficult part of the job was to tread lightly, knowing I'm an outsider, knowing that, these people have been here doing the job well for this long. Well, what is he here for? What's his, and trying to make it clear to all those programmers, look, I'm just here to help. I have no desire to, I'm not here to, interfere with what you're doing. I'm just here to take the good work you're doing and trying to find a way to make it a little better.
I'm not from radio to bring home the bad habits here.
Yeah. And, look, we don't get ratings, our jobs, every one of us that works at Sirius XM, our mission, our job is to get a subscriber to swipe a credit card for another month of Sirius XM. How we accomplish that is different. The people on our golf channel do it by providing best in class talk about golf. People on our, soccer channel, same deal. I'm not quite sure how I directly can contribute to that, but I try my best. But that's our mission. Yep. Oh, guess what? Time out.
Go ahead.
Be right back.
And we're
It was
back.
$185 I wasn't planning on spending, but
But now you get clean clothes.
yes, but now I don't have to go downstairs to the eighth floor and wash my clothes. So there's that.
You say you
I,
don't get ratings, by the way, but you
yeah,
kind of do. That would be Tech Survey and Fred Jacobs, which
yeah,
sort of shows the usage that their P1 listeners would say, yeah, I will dabble in to sports radio. Also, Edison comes out with studies
yep.
as well that shows the listenership. But I think what's really important to let people know is that it's always going up. It's not like when people talk about the demise of radio going down and cum loss, that doesn't affect what you guys are doing.
No, those are all data points for us, and we do our own internal research as well. And part of my job, by the way, is to um, keep track of the best practices of terrestrial radio. What are they doing that's different? Because listening habits, right, are the same. It doesn't matter what input button you press on your car stereo, whether it's AM, FM, satellite, whatever. If you're in the car for 12 minutes, you're in the car for 12 minutes, and that's that. Um, but yeah, so it's interesting. We get all these different data points, and we get broad research, we get narrow research on our channels, and we take all those into consideration. But really, and we have streaming data too. But really, none of those are true action items, right? We're never going to take a piece of research and decide to hire or fire a host based on that. Whereas with AM, FM, the Nielsen numbers aren't what they're supposed to be. Well, maybe that's, we need to make a change with that show. And all our personnel changes, I don't even want to get into personnel changes as much as look, it's the ear test for us. It's are we creating good radio that our subscribers want? And yeah, we do get that feedback, but that's one of the things that I always talk with our program directors about is they have a thirst for information. They want data. They want to know, hey, did people listen to that show? And my message always kind of be careful what you wish for, um, because maybe that great show that passed the ear test for all of us, didn't garner the numbers we thought it would be. But it's not as significant to us. We look, we have channels. The way we structure sports radio, where we have an NFL channel and a soccer channel and a golf channel, we're super serving those audiences, right? So as long as we're doing content that pleases the golf fan, we win. And when we're not, then we lose. But yeah, you're right. It is growing. We just had a big press event last week as we record this, to launch our new app experience, which I've been fortunate enough to be involved with that and be I'm beta testing right now, and it's a game changer for our listeners, and discovery of content and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's only getting bigger, and I credit our company with um, realizing they just can't sit back and be, the king of the car and the satellite radio side of things. They've got to be people got to take the content with them, and be, that's keeping up with the Joneses, right? And so, this is a huge step in that process. But yeah, it is growing. It's growing and doing well.
Yeah, and so to that, you're not going to be getting rid of your esports channel or
Yeah.
fantasy sports. I mean, somebody always needs that information, so it's always going to be there. I mean, you just can't compare your NFL channel against your other ones.
No, and look, from a local perspective, you know, WIP or the Sports Hub, right? They're going to be talking Eagles and Patriots or whatever. We're going to be talking NFL, and we're going to be spending a segment on the Eagles. Um, we can't compete with that. We're not going to hyper localize them to death. But what we can do that, maybe the local station can't is, we got Phil Simms on, talking about him, or, on Coach K is talking college basketball on our college sports channel. That's the separator is, we're not going to out localize the local station, but we're going to have people credibility talking in these various niches, however you're supposed to say it nowadays, um, at a high level that you're just not going to get anywhere else.
So from a technology perspective, because I've got a fun car upstairs that I actually bought so that I could play with the technology. Right. And, Apple CarPlay was important to me. But now I want to make a jump to Sirius XM and bring that into the vehicle. Are you talking about changes that would just allow me to use an app in order to get access, or do I still want to live on the satellite?
Whenever anybody asks me about Sirius XM, the first thing I tell them is either get the app only subscription or make sure the app is included in your subscription, which it is in most of them. But yeah, I drive around Washington, D.C., so I have a car that's like, for city life, meaning it's going to get dinged up. I have a 2014 Volkswagen Jetta that I drive around in, that I put an aftermarket radio that has Sirius XM on it. But most of the time, I'm plugging in and using the CarPlay version of the app. The new version of the app that launches on the 14th of December is just next level. Now I will say it's not going to be complete on the 14th. It's version A of what's going to build to be something really, really great. But a huge leap in improvement. But yeah, I would, if someone was asking me today the best way to go about becoming a Sirius XM subscriber, I would say buy the app subscription. If you got a car you can plug your phone into, that's the way to go. It's a game. Come the 14th of December, the experience will be greatly improved.
I can hear the podcast section of the audience kind of screaming, "Is this why you killed the Stitcher app?" And I'm like, maybe, possibly, but it's also a good time to just ask you, like, Sirius XM has a podcast strategy. Simplecast is a part of that. Stitcher was a part of that. And how does it all integrate and come together for you guys?
So all this podcast content's available on the Sirius XM app. I got to double check to make sure this one is. If not, it should be. I know people that can that can make it happen.
Well, I'm in Pandora, which you guys own too.
Well, then you should be good. But yeah, the idea is to make it an audio destination. One of the biggest challenges with SiriusXM is people have their 5-6 presets, right? And that's where they go. But in reality, there is so much content available to them that the person doesn't know about. And that's where the app changes things. The app, knows what you've listened to, will recommend new things to you that you might not even know existed. Yet it's there for you. It's pretty wild tech, as far as what I've seen so far in the beta testing. But I feel that the people that use the app go much deeper into what we have than just the people that listen to the radio. And that's the goal, is to, for us to keep people on their platform. We just want people to realize how much they're getting for their money that they're paying us each month. Yeah, Howard's awesome. Howard's the GOAT, right? And if you love NFL, the NFL's there. If you love the games, we have every game. But there's also this special because, Jimmy Fallon was in the studio the other day and doing this. And, Will Ferrell dropped by to talk about that you may not ordinarily discover, but it's there for you. And that's where the app comes in. And that's, by the way, one of my stints. I have to go to our New York. I go to our New York facility once a month. Spend the day up there. And one of the great joys that I have is we have this video screen in the lobby that welcomes the different guests every day. And, being a guy who came up in music radio and pop culture and all that stuff, outside of just being sports guy. When I was there last Thursday, Jimmy Fallon was in the building. I'm a huge Prince fan, and a while back, The Revolution was there, and I, went to our PR folks. I'm like, I need to get a picture with The Revolution. just stuff like that. You just never know who's going to be in there on a given day. It's just amazing. I walked by last month. I walked by Cardi B. I probably couldn't pick Cardi B out of a lineup, but I like brushed shoulders with her. The guy I was walking with was just like, you just, brush shoulders with Cardi B. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. So that's the stuff that's happening where we work now is, on any given day, there's those type of people doing unique things on the radio. And our job is to help you discover that, right?
Well, it's wild. What do you think about the future of terrestrial radio as you see it from where you sit now? Because you have so much experience with it, doing the music and then the sports, and where it sits now. I get my updates every day from from Jason Barrett and Barrett Sports Media. I can follow along and see it, but what do you see that I may not be seeing?
I love my brothers and sisters in AM/FM radio. I will never talk bad about those folks. The fact of the matter is, when you compare the product that FM, AM/FM, let's just use talk or sports talk as an example. When you compare the product, what they churn out versus what we churn out, not saying just the content, the overall product, the bottom line is you can get in the car and your entire commute could be a spot set on an FM radio, right? We play commercials, just not nearly as many. I just feel, I know they have a business to run and I know it costs a lot to do it, but it just seems weird to me that when it comes time to figure out how to, pay the bills, that the first instinct is let's get rid of the content creators. Not looking at it from the 10,000-foot view of, well, crap, there's 40 minutes of content in the hour. And even in that content, we're, it's sponsored by this and added by that. I don't know the answer, but I just know the product isn't great right now.
Yeah.
And the fun factor isn't there. Look, the 90s were a different time, and the Power Pig is never going to come back. That's just a fact. That was a time and place for that has passed. But are radio stations having fun anymore? In Detroit, and this is the early 2000s, we didn't have the rights to the Lions. We couldn't be live at training camp. We went to the place that bordered the Lions training camp, asked if we could broadcast from there, rented a scissor lift, and put our host up on a scissor lift above Lions training camp. That's the fun stuff. And I'm not saying PDs aren't doing fun stuff, but like that fun factor, I just don't feel like is very prevalent. It's very safe right now. It's very vanilla. And have some fun, bring smiles to people's faces. That's what I would say. But I love my AM and FM brothers. I really do. I go to conferences. It's funny. You mentioned you see me at conferences, and it's so funny. I feel sometimes like I'm the spy in the middle of the room. They're going through all these presentations and Sirius XM, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like kind of hiding. But I love you guys. I really do. I'm not here to, take food off your plate. I want you to succeed. But yeah, man, it's just tough, and it's nobody's fault. There's a business to run, and the economics of it suck, but the product just isn't great right now.
Yeah, and it is costly. In Canada, we have a glut of sports radio stations. They're all on AM because of regulations, right. As it were. Nobody took care of the regulations for 20 years, so we never got to move them over to FM, and now they're just closing them because they just cost money. And who am I to say anything? Because I wouldn't buy it for $1.
Right.
And it's just, that's where the technology is at. And if I were to run all the podcasts that I manage 24/7, I wouldn't be able to make any money back. It would just, It would cost so much.
Yeah. The economics of this is great. And what have the consumers been conditioned to? It's like, good content costs money. And, So, most podcasts are on the trying to use the business model of being ad based, and it's a tough road. That's a tough road to try to make your money back. Subscription services like ours, I don't know how many, outside of the video streaming services and Sirius XM, who's putting their stuff behind a paywall and making a ton of money right now. I'm not sure. It's just what the consumers expect. They want it free because that's what they think it should be, and it ain't free. It costs money.
Yep.
So
very difficult to charge for a podcast when there's 4 million that are free.
Right. And it's a tough business, and I wish all of them the best. I wish the starting point seems to be, how can we, offset the cost and make revenue? It's almost like, let's reset and just try to create the best product we can and then make money off of it, and find out how we can monetize it. Just isn't going to work in today's climate. It's just, I wish I had if I did have the answer, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today.
Yeah. I wouldn't have to do this podcast.
Exactly. But it's just, I love my people. I love the folks doing it, my friends. It's just the product is a difficult listen right now compared to what I listen to on a daily basis.
Jason, this marks the very end of me going to conferences and saying, I really should do an episode with that guy.
Yeah, I know. Maybe we should have put this off a little longer. Can we just erase the tape and maybe next conference? No, this has been fun. And, in some ways it's been like a therapy session. But I listen to your podcast all the time. I love hearing radio people talk about radio and the different perspectives that they bring. So, it's an honor that you asked.
Therapy, huh? That'll be $195.
Yeah. Well, hell, while we were doing this, I paid $185 for the guy to fix my washing machine. So, what's another couple $100?